Now, as I record this, if you remember, it was in the overnight hours into Saturday last that we began the bombing campaign in Iran. And now here we are the Thursday following it, and we're that many days into the bombing campaign. One of the things that I think if you'd have asked any Christian, they would have been able to say, there's no question about it, people are going to start saying all kinds of just vile things against Jewish people. It just is what it is. This is the sad part. And it really helps us to understand that there is a spiritual dynamic behind this that we have to expect. There has never been a group of people throughout all of man's history that have been more targeted for annihilation than the Jewish people. And so we have a great deal of their history, so we know this to be true. There have been attempts to eradicate them from the planet multiple times in this world's history. So Hitler was just the most recent. There are plenty around them. That was really what they were hoping to do in October, by the way, of 2023, when Hamas invaded. And Hamas got out in front of it. If they'd have waited for everybody, there was a much larger plan. That was supposed to bring down the entire nation of Israel. But of course, God will intervene and not allow that to happen. They're there because he's brought them back. So that's one of the things that I think the church needs to understand. So let's deal with the first part of this. The world hates Jewish people. If you have any question about that, look at what happens at the United Nations whenever Israel is the point. And so they are singled out for condemnation by the United Nations more than any other group. Actually, you have more things said about Jewish people in the course of a year by resolutions and all the rest of it against Israel than every other country on the planet combined at the UN. It's the most anti-Semitic collection of dirtbags that the world's ever put together in one place. So the United Nations is just an evil, wicked, vile organization, but it's comprised of the nations from around the world that all individually hate Israel. They just get a chance to get together and express it in a place where they could all gather together, but for a few nations that will stand with her. And sometimes, depending on who's running those countries, it kind of comes and goes as far as their care for them. So Israel has most of its existence, with the exception of the United States, kind of stood alone. So interestingly enough, the idea that the world hates them shouldn't come as any surprise to us whatsoever. We should expect that. There's no mystery there. So that is who Israel is. The idea that you've got the problem that they have to encounter, it just kind of goes with the territory. What makes me crazy is the church and how goofed up the church is on this. And I'm going to put those into a couple of categories as well. There is part of the church that absolutely believes that Israel really isn't even relevant any longer, that the fact that they're back in the land now isn't really because God has brought them back into the land. They're just there, and they've taken over, and because the world felt sorry for them after World War II, they gave them a plot of land. But they really don't have anything. Everything that God ever promised to them, because they rejected Jesus, was stripped from them, and now the promises have been made to the church. That's one wing of Christianity. We call them replacement theology, or they refer to it as supersessionists. So superseding the promises to God because of their rejection, those promises have been made to the church. And again, you can't help those people. They're going to be they're just as vile in their hatred of Israel as the secularists. But there are another group within the church. Now, again, I'm not even going to talk about those like myself, who would be, when people like to throw the accusation against me about you're a Christian Zionist. Yeah, and what do you want me to say? Of course, I absolutely believe that God's putting them back in the land for this time, and Zion, Israel, Jerusalem, that he's restoring them back to their homeland. I have no problems with that. And as a Christian, I support it 100%. It's one of the reasons why I love taking groups to Israel. I want to get them there. I want people to see it, and it changes the perspective of so many people. Once they see it with their own eyes, they see in operation every day, all day, that God is doing a work among his people. So there are those within the church that would have a different view of this. And you look at my YouTube page, the comments that I get there, because I did that whole series when we're talking about Israel, I get this all the time. Well, I might support the idea that God would want to put them back in the land, but I can't support the government that's there. Okay. Nobody tells you that you have to, but you're making a distinction that God doesn't make. So that's the problem with it. We have to really settle the question. at the most simple level and just make it this. Do you believe that God has brought them back into the land for these days? It's a yes or no question. And if it's a yes, if you say, well, I do believe that 1948 was really kind of the beginning of God restoring them to the land, just as he had promised that he would do through the prophets, Jeremiah and Amos and Ezekiel and others, talked about God regathering them at some time. They've been displaced from the land for 1900 years before 1948. So we would look at all of those passages and say, well, maybe we don't understand them. Or you'd be looking at them through the ages and saying the day will come when God will bring them back. And then that fits perfectly with the prophets without making it say something that it doesn't. So I'm of the opinion that when God says he's going to bring them back, he's going to bring them back. And if he's the one who is bringing them back in, then that means the people that are there are the ones that he has chosen. Now, it means that you might have some that you don't like the things that they do. Oftentimes the stuff that they will accuse Israel of doing, they accuse them of things that they've heard in the news, and that's when you start hearing people talk about, oh, well, they're practicing a genocide and they're this and they're that. Well, interestingly enough, they have had coming up on 3 years. In October, it's going to be 3 years since they were attacked by Hamas, and inside of Gaza, there's 2 million people that live in Gaza. It's densely populated. And there's basically walls up around it to keep those people in. If Israel wanted a genocide, they could have done it on any given day. They could have wiped out everybody that lives in Gaza in an afternoon. They have the ability. Take a look at Iran. What they're doing in Iran, they could do that in Gaza and not leave a soul alive if that's what they wanted. So the idea that it's a genocide, that is said by ignorant people that don't even understand what the term means. And so if it wasn't for the fact that they were attacked in the gruesome, just disgusting, demonic way that they were, October 7th of 23, none of this would be happening. So people don't want to remember that. So for myself as a believer, when I hear people say, well, I might be okay with the Jewish people, but I can't stand their leadership. Okay, they usually can't explain why. They start to point to Gaza, and they say things out of complete ignorance. Genocide, this, that, and the other thing, killing children, all that. They've bought into the nonsense propaganda that the world's been dishing out to them. So never are they ever looking at what prompted Israel to have to take the action that they do. They always look at the end result. But again, you're missing the point. If you're hearing this, and maybe even you're listening to me and you're just gritting your teeth and you're furious, you have to just ask yourself a question. Is God bringing the people back because he has plans with them in the future? And if that's the case, then your complaints about who's in charge and what's being done and all that stuff is secondary. Actually, it's not even, it's a non sequitur. It has nothing to do with this. And I'll throw this out there as kind of the last thought in this. When I hear people say that, they basically say because of what their leadership is doing, because they're rejecting Jesus, because they haven't accepted him as Messiah, because all these different things, they say they can't be God's people because they're doing X, Y, or Z. And I would basically point back to any time during the kings, especially the really incredibly wicked ones. When the incredible wicked ones were in charge, Manasseh's the one that comes to mind, probably more so than any other ones, but there was a whole slew of them in the north. Every king in the north was wicked, and a whole assortment of them in the south were wicked as well. When those people were reigning, to the point like in Manasseh's time and under Ahaz, they were sacrificing their children in the Hinnom Valley, just outside of Jerusalem, in one of the valleys. Did they ever stop being his people at that time? The simple answer is no. So their conduct is not what makes them his people. Their conduct would be about how they would determine usually whether or not they could even be in the land. Conduct had a big thing, but it never changed them. It never changed them structurally. And when God said he would restore them, he didn't say he was going to restore them because they got their act together. It's because we are in these days for this time, and this world is not going to exist forever. God tells us that there is an end to things, and part of that end to things is going to be revolving around the place of Israel. A temple will be rebuilt. There will be a lot of activity in Jerusalem to the point where the nations will come against the nation of Israel and Jerusalem in particular. And when that takes place, it has to be there for that to happen. Doesn't tell us that all that's done because they're coming after God's people. because they got their act together. They're coming after him, or they're coming after Jerusalem because that's where God has put his name for thousands of years. And it is the place, it's the focal place, it's where Jesus will rule and reign for 1,000 years in the future. That's very Jewish, ladies and gentlemen. And the fact that the nations would be stirred up because the devil does so to try to kill them off, that shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone. So we need to see with eyes wide open everything that's in the text and quit regurgitating the garbage that you hear from the replacement theology people, and worse yet, the kooks that we see on the right, the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and even the Megyn Kellys and all the rest of them. There's a whole number of those people. If you're listening to them and getting your information from them, get a different source. These are people saying some of the most vile garbage against Israel, and they're making it sound like the only reason that we're there is because we're doing it because Israel wants us to do it. Now, I understand we've had very, very weak leadership, and I don't care what you think of Donald Trump. It doesn't matter to me at all. But the idea that he gets pushed around by someone else, you're not paying attention if you think that's the case. If you think that he's going to war because of Bibi, go ahead and look at how many people got on the other side of him when it came to military things. Think General Mattis in his first administration, or John Bolton, or other ones. They finally came to a place where he disagreed with them. Where are they now? So the idea that people with a different view of things can make and manipulate him to do something, if you think that's him, you're not paying attention. You're just talking crazy because you've got an agenda. So important that we understand all of these things and say, for all of its failures and all of its faults, and every nation that's made up of men is going to be the same thing. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. But are they the ones that God has promised in an eternal sense? He's given them an everlasting promise of the land as a people. He only made that with Israel. He didn't make it with the church. It wasn't about land with the church. It was just about spiritual regeneration and rebirth. But it had nothing to do with our DNA. Our DNA is from all over the world if we're the church. Jew and Gentile alike, the church was never promised land. That's all stuff to them. That's why we went through it weeks and weeks and weeks of little short portions of this whole Israel message of understanding who they are, biblically speaking. But addressing the rampant anti-Semitism, we are going to see it from the world. You can't fix that. The problem is when the church helps the narrative along because of ignorance, and it needs to be addressed. So it's for us to be able to say, not so fast. What you're saying is not accurate. It's not biblical. It's born of a lack of understanding of the prophetic passages, and yes, it's born in ignorance. So we need to address ignorance with the truth. And so, if you have any questions on any of that stuff, contact me. oldpaththeology.net. There's an email that's there. Love to hear from you. If you have questions on this, again, that you want to just do out in the open, the comment section stays open on the YouTube channel. Even if you disagree, and you can do so agreeably, I let it stand. If you're going to get belligerent and nasty, I'll just run you out of the place. So it's important that we have these discussions, because we shouldn't have the division that we have within the church. We should make sure that there is a genuine understanding. Truth only occupies one position, and we ought to make sure that we're on the right side of that position.